All right, welcome back, everybody. It's House Energy and Digital Infrastructure, and we are talking today about S202, an act relating to portable solar energy generation devices. And we are here with TJ Poor from the Department of Public Service, and then after that, we're going to hear from Safar Utilities. So my name is Kathleen James. I'm from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. John Ferry.
Richard Bailey, Vermont too.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, is there any? Michael Southworth, Caledonia too.
Christopher Howland, Rutland Ford.
Vera Corey, Washington too.
Laura Sibilia, Wyndham too.
Great, and oh, that's good. And who's in the room?
Andrea Cohen, Vermont Electric Cooperative.
Great. There we are.
Oh, sorry, Gabrielle Molina, Del Jacqueline Martin.
Michelle Farnham, Primer, on behalf of that penalty on Zoom.
Great.
Katie Irby, eminent consider one.
Super. All right, TJ, over to you.
Right, TJ Poor, Public Service Department. Thank you for having me back. So my testimony today will describe the department's current position with S202 as passed by the Senate. The Senate modified its introduced bill to incorporate most of the department's suggestions and original comments. As you might imagine, safety and consumer protections, including affordability, have been paramount to our consideration of the bill. And we continue to support the general concept of S202 as it's drafted here. I'm going to offer one additional language suggestion today that didn't make it into the bill, but I don't believe it will be controversial. At least I hope it's not. Just a clarification. And I do want to just make some other observations today, similar to what I made in the Senate, but I think it'd be useful for you all. So I want to start just with safety, for which I am not an expert on safety. So I'll let Mr. DeRocher from the Department of Public Safety and the utilities primarily speak to it, but I did want to bring it up here and note that compliance with Underwriters Laboratories 3700 listing is a critical component of the bill that we really support. And so there was a white paper that was issued by UL Solutions in December of 2025 on plug-in PV. And they now have completed their outline of investigation, which is UL 3700. And they concluded that I'm going to just quote this and read it. And I've sent to Alex my written testimony this morning as well. But UL Solutions concluded that, quote, special risk mitigation requirements are necessary to allow the safe use of plug-in photovoltaic products. In the absence of these special measures, plug-in photovoltaics can present electric shock hazards and fire hazards to consumers, potentially defeating protective technologies required for public protection without any awareness that the previous protection has been compromised. Allowing plug-in photovoltaics to be plugged into any existing branch circuit with no mitigation for the above concerns is not supported by UL Solutions. There are potential engineered solutions that can be applied and will be necessary to promote safe use of plug-in photovoltaic products. And that led to, unquote, and that led to the development and what's in UL 3700. So I just wanted to kind of get that into the record. There's a link to the white paper here, and why that we really support UL 3700 being a component of the bill.
Thanks, TJ. We're hearing from UL tomorrow, and they submitted in December to us a letter and a white paper, which had been posted appropriately at the time under our H bill, and we've moved that testimony over now to the S bill.
Great.
So it's up there
Sorry,
now.
I was a little behind. You're already up to speed on
Well,
this,
not
so,
really behind. So we just got that stuff posted yesterday, and then UL's coming in tomorrow. So
okay, perfect. The utilities are following me today and can testify to any concerns they have with safety to line workers, et cetera. And I just defer to them on those aspects. To the structure of how this might work, portable solar will really offset real-time consumption at the variable retail rate. Makes perfect sense, right? That's like the behind the meter consumption reduction that we're talking about. That makes sense. That's a good thing. The bill allows for generation to be exported. But similar to how Utah's structure is upon which this legislation was modeled, it's intended to not allow for compensation for exported generation. And we agree with that feature as well. So and the bill really clearly indicates that portable solar energy generation devices are not eligible for net metering. So this leads me to my one suggestion to make this bill a little more clear. So on page 2, on line 16 of the bill, there's a reference to excess generation fed back into the grid, and that's where it says that won't be compensated by an electric distribution utility. Excess generation is really a defined term in net metering and represents really generation from a net metered facility in a month that exceeds consumption for that month. It's like a net billing feature. And so it really only exists excess generation in the net metering construct, which this bill doesn't allow. And so I suggest striking out the phrase excess generation fed back into the grid and substituting it with generation exported to the grid. And that just clearly, just makes it clear it's a kind of outside the net metering rubric and is, a more clear description of what's happening. And I feel like the intent of the bill.
I wonder if it should say something like incidental generation exported to the grid or something like that. Because generation exported to the grid sounds like there's going to be generation exported to the grid, but there's probably not going to be very much.
Probably not. Yeah, agreed. But
there's a way of capturing that idea.
So would that suggest that something that is not incidental would be treated differently?
I don't know if it needs a modifier. I think if it's just,
Any generation exported.
yeah.
Kind of an all inclusive term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe this is we're talking statute here.
Right.
Well, right. So maybe everybody kind of knew what this meant and we were good anyway. But I do think that is, right. That is our suggestion.
Howard?
So were you involved in the discussion of where they required, they call it smart meters, but automatic meter reading? For guy from California said time of day rating and so forth. So smart meters have all sorts of registry blocks of they can record stuff in, so that in the old day, if you suspected somebody to be backfeeding, put in what was called a 2/10 meter, so that like they used to have back your vehicle up, you could run the mileage off, jack it up and put it in reverse, and they did away with that with odometers. They did the same thing with electric meters. So if somebody's generating on leg A with their outlet, with the 120 outlet, but they're using on leg B, point of common coupling is the transformer. You got to go back to get from 180 degrees out of phase. So that essentially would be exported to the grid, converted by 180 degrees, and come back on the other leg.
So I wasn't directly involved in conversation in the Senate on smart meters, but in general, my understanding is that when we have a utility that has advanced metering infrastructure, those meters will have a couple of multiple channels,
Right.
right? And so you will match those up in any given hour and see, okay, well, this channel was going out and producing generation. This channel had consumption, and then you kind of net that out. And then if the net is above zero, or to export, maybe it's below
On
zero.
that time increment, on
Right.
that 15-minute increment when we talk about demand metering.
Right. And so, so I think that is how it would be managed, but I suggest you ask the utilities about their metering also. Okay, two other items here. One is observation, just an observation on the cost of these units. So they're currently really expensive. In the future, they may reduce in price. It is an option for residents, but it's an expensive one. These, I won't go through it here, but in my testimony, I put a little map in there, and even if costs reduce, we're looking at an over 10-year payback for customers. So again, this is okay if we're just reducing behind the meter consumption and it's the customer's choice and they understand that's what they're getting into, that's okay. But I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware that this is really not a solution for low income Vermonters. We still need to continue to work on other solutions here. And so I just wanted to point that out, that really, for now at least, it's a measure for those who can afford it. But again, that's okay as long as there's not state or ratepayer subsidies, which there isn't in this bill with technology. Like a separate choice we could make, but we're not talking about that now. And then similar what we just talked about, that the generation that's exported is not compensated, because then that has the potential to turn into incentive. Just some observations there. And then finally, just want a note on consumer protection. You may have been provided this also, but there is a Clean Energy States Alliance publication that recently came out in 2025 that noted that, as a new product, states may want to promulgate consumer protection requirements, such as for claims about savings, regulations, and safety, and to encourage safe installations, clear guidelines, educational how-to materials would need to be developed. And there's things like the savings, consumers may, they can purchase these things online, right? You can purchase them from any provider. And there's some concern that they may be purchasing something on a promise that it's not going to deliver. That happens with all kinds of products, but it may be worth, in terms of consumer protections, talking to the AG's office. I'm not sure if they came in or not and said their opinion on that. The other thing that people may be doing this for is for climate reasons. I'm observing that we have 100% renewable standard now, perhaps 100% clean energy standard in the future, but people may be willing to invest in that payback for climate reasons, but that they're not actually going to be making impact to Vermont's progress towards greenhouse gas emissions, our requirements, GWSA requirements, as we measure by the greenhouse gas inventory. And so, there was years ago, there was like a big, I think it was the FCC, not the SEC, but the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, concerned about like the recs and treatment about renewable energy credits and who claims them. And really, this is there could be some issues there. I think previous versions of this bill had some liability provisions also in them, and those provisions are not in there in this version, and so I'm not going to comment too much on them today, except to say that they're we want to ensure that customers are not taking on liability that they aren't aware of. And so, if something happens to the grid or to, because of export of generation, then customers shouldn't be liable. And so we just want to make sure that base is covered as well. And there may be more discussion about liability coming up. So overall, in conclusion, we continue to support S202. Like I said, like the reducing the behind the meter consumption for people without subsidy, and an option to do that is a good thing. So long as safety concerns are met, UL 3700 goes a long way towards that, maybe away. And we look forward to, reviewing any potential refinements to the bill beyond.
Thanks, TJ. One of the bills that we heard about yesterday and are going to take a look at is coming out of Virginia, and I haven't even read it, but apparently the Virginia bill does include some consumer protection language, and that seems to me to be an important oversight in this bill right now as it's drafted. I think we do need to get the AG in and AG in here and talk about how we can make sure that, consumers aren't seeing false claims of savings, and that there's, liability protection as well. So I'm really interested in that. Two of the things that you pointed out this bill doesn't contemplate and shouldn't contemplate, because I don't think it's relevant, is we aren't talking about providing any kind of subsidy or, making ratepayers pay for these. That's not contemplated here at all. I think it would be inappropriate. So just clarify, we're on the same page about that. And I also don't think anybody's viewing this bill in terms of Vermont's larger greenhouse gas reductions goals. The point here is to create a bill so that if somebody can afford one of these and wants one, they can get one safely. So it's in some ways a pretty narrow bill. One of the things that was in the H bill but isn't in the S bill that we've been talking about a lot too is notification. So in the H bill, we had talked about just a simple notification form that folks would fill out to let the utilities know that they have one of these. And we had heard secondhand, and we're going to hear from the utilities directly, that the utilities maybe didn't think that was important or necessary, but I'm not sure I agree. So I feel like we should know where these are and where they're being used. And I'm wondering what you think about notification and who that notification should go to. If the utilities don't want it, do you guys want it?
I think, at a certain scale, a number of these, that may be a good time for notification. I'm aware that the utilities didn't want it. And, I think to the extent that UL 3700, comes close to, if not effectively stops really unwarranted export to the grid, then I'm not sure that it is necessary for notification. It could, if there was a lot of these that really started affecting long-term utility planning and the grid, then perhaps, but I'm not.
Wouldn't it be
I'm not
better
sure.
to gather the data from the beginning though, instead of getting to the point where it's like, I just feel like we have such systemic problems with data collection. And so instead
Agreed.
of 10 years from now being like, oh, I wish we'd tracked those from the beginning. Why shouldn't we just start tracking them now?
We don't oppose notification and tracking. I think I am not sure in the near term what we're going to do, but you make a good point about kind of like that long-term trajectory and understanding what is on the system from the beginning.
Yeah, and that made me think about how much visibility we currently have in feeder lines, like not much.
Right.
But that might
And
change,
if you
right?
think about these as an appliance, right, like totally behind the meter, like we don't necessarily have reporting on how many if you purchase a more efficient product and you don't get a rebate from Efficiency Vermont, and you're just doing it, then we don't have any reporting of that, right? And so if we think about it just as an efficient product, then we don't necessarily need reporting of it, similar to any other appliance. But if it is going to be something that we ultimately, we have lots of reporting for Efficiency Vermont, as you all know. But that's because we're providing those incentives and understanding what the state program is offering. So I could
Like your grid doesn't have the ability to backfeed the grid,
right,
even if it's minimal.
agree. So
I don't,
like I said, I don't think we would oppose a reporting requirement. I think that the biggest downside is the administrative burden, with what the utilities describe, what that might be, but
okay. Yeah, but how,
The utility's,
Sorry,
the
sorry.
utility's gonna pick up your more efficient refrigerator because your usage over a period of time, March to March comparisons, we're gonna show that you're using less electricity to get more efficient appliance.
but they're not gonna know why.
No, well, right.
They're not gonna know you bought.
No, or that you no longer use a toaster oven, or whatever, they don't know what your habits are, but
Right.
when you mingle that amongst everybody on the circuit, they can know. What about the energy efficiency and this 4 cents that if you had new net metering, you pay 4 cents for everything you generate for whatever reason. Net metering 2024 program going to charge. So
I'm not sure.
So you're gonna, if you generate your own, you're gonna kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour, but you're not gonna pay the energy efficiency charge that somebody who has not their other generation for their home gets charged for their consumption.
So with these portable solar products you're talking about, yeah, you would avoid. It's just like another reduction in load. As if if you shut off all your lights, you're not going to pay the efficiency charge on that, during the day, because you're not using the generation. So if it's wholly behind the meter, I think that's okay.
I was wondering if you talked a little bit more about the liability issue brought up a while ago. I'm not sure I really understood.
Yeah. So if there was some export to the grid and that caused I'm going to get out of my depth really quickly. Some electrical issue. I don't even like a transformer to blow. I don't know that that is like what might happen, but just a cost on the electric system that they want to ensure that the customer is not liable for the customer is not unknowingly liable to that. Like they may be, right, but it's that would, if they are liable, it needs to be disclosed to them. And so I think that is the clear thing. Like if they're, the utility is not going to be liable, which they probably shouldn't be, right? Other ratepayers be held liable for something caused, but a customer buys this and has no idea that there's a risk that they could be liable for something.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that they know that when they purchase
I
it.
just thought of an example. Maybe whatever the safety device is that prevents backfeeding in the case of an outage, that safety device fails. There's a backfeed and injure some alignment or something.
Yes,
That could be who's liable for that?
right. Or if there was no safety device to start with in the product. right?
Well, that's,
So
that's, yeah,
and that should be hopefully in the UL listing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it sounds like it would be a product line that maybe should, or something like that. And
Right. That's why I'm struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
Because product liability is really my area.
so you're suggesting that should be made explicit.
So I think we had a suggestion that it came right at the end of right before it was going to go, and I think there was some discussion in the Senate on liability language, and I could provide some of that language to you on consumer protection. I think it was really that disclosure requirement of any liability that a
Yeah.
consumer might have.
Okay.
So so if they do have liability, they know it going in, and it's like,
And
you
who would
know,
make that disclosure?
the product seller.
The product seller, so theoretically the manufacturer, right? Okay, thanks.
Right.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, TJ, thank you so much.
I did you.
Great. Who's up next? Andrea? Thanks, TJ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning,
Hi.
your record, Andrea Cohen, Vermont Electric Cooperative. And if I ask you to repeat questions, it's because I can't even hear. I don't, everything's settled and,
Oh, okay.
everything's going around. So if I'm talking loud, it's because I can't even hear myself. S202, happy to provide some comments. Some of them directed to what you were just discussing. The one change we might be looking at around liability. So,
Okay.
but let me hit the basics first. Generally, when we saw this bill, we were like, who's going to do this? Low income folks, probably not that appealing as it stands right now, but at the same time, we're open to emerging technologies and new opportunities. And, how can we see our way to this being a yes, to allow people who might be interested in this to partake. So, a lot of the changes that happened on the Senate side addressed many of our initial concerns. So generally, we are okay with this bill. There's one change I want to talk about, but one thing we wanted to level set on was keeping those expectations modest in terms of what, is this really going to change the system or change the world for folks? Like keeping expectations pretty modest. We don't think a lot of folks in our service territory are going to run out and spend thousands of dollars, on something that it will take 10 years to come back. But if folks want to, as long as it does no harm, meaning, it's safe in the home and on our system, right? And those are separate things in terms of fire protection and safety and kind of the behind the meter work. And then what happens on our system to our financial and safety concerns for like line workers, kind of separate things, but want to make sure that's all set up. And a lot of the changes in the bill, I think, address a lot of our initial concerns. Also, as TJ mentioned, we're not interested in paying for these, having other members pay for them. So provided there's no subsidy or cost shift and somebody wants to do that, fine. The outstanding issue that and the consumer protections, I do need to say a few things about that. There's a lot of times when people are sold products or services that they end up not being happy with. We didn't sell them those products or services, but we're the first ones that get the phone call. Why is my bill so high? I put in a heat pump. Why am I spending this much money? We didn't tell you to buy that, but, or size it too big or, but we feel terrible because all of a sudden their bills went and they were not adequately aware of the implications, whether it's sizing a solar system is too big or too small. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough when folks that can barely afford to pay their bills are now having additional costs and things that they feel like they have nowhere to go. So I really appreciate the consumer protection interest and try to make sure people understand what they're buying and that it's a good choice. And there's only so much we could do. We're happy to partner on that to an extent, but it goes behind the meter. Appliances and services are not the thing we're we're installing or selling, and yet we do get phone calls. So the more we can be proactive, the better. So people are getting into something that makes sense for them.
Curiosity about something you said. Maybe I'm missing something. I understand that you guys get inappropriately placed calls about projects that are not your deal. Why would you guys even have to partner on consumer liability issues? To me, this is a clear product thing. If
Just because, folks interact with us frequently, we don't have to partner, but, our members are, we're a co-op. These are our members who care about them. They get a bill from us every month. So the first thing when something isn't what they expect, we're going to be the first phone call a lot of the times, and we try to work with them and direct them to the right place, but we run out of
directing them to the right place.
Yeah, we try, but just today, we're in the card room today, and a legislator who's been dealing with a constituent on a certain issue is still calling us asking for help, and it has nothing to do with us.
Right.
And yet we're the face, we're the ones sending them a bill every month. We can't not be involved.
Right.
So
It's sort of like being a state legislator. Okay.
So,
You don't get compensated as well.
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. So, the more we can do no harm. But like I said, the bill, the provisions that are in there about, limits and guardrails and safety, things are in pretty good shape. I will say, this liability issue that was just mentioned, I think we totally disagree with TJ's take that, and this was what I was going to bring to you today as one issue that I think still needs attention that we didn't get settled up on the other house, on the other body. We wanted to be explicitly clear that we are not responsible, meaning our members, if one member puts products or things on the system that does damage to the system, has some damage to the system, to the transformer, we will go to that member and expect that they will compensate that. Why should we pass that cost on to all the other members as we are today? If somebody does damage to the system, we go to them and, our lawyers and their lawyers, try to figure it out. Because there's a provision in this bill, a provision that is not in this bill, Utah, I believe, has it, and you were just mentioning Virginia. I think those bills have this language that makes it very explicit that the utility is not responsible for damage to the system caused by these products. The only reason we bring that up is there is a provision in the bill that passed the House, the Senate. Sorry, I'm catching up with myself today. It explicitly says that the distribution company cannot require a customer to pay any fee or charge related to the device.
Oh, I see.
Generally,
Okay.
we're okay with, right? You install it, you do it, we're not going to charge you
The
anything.
installation.
But if you did damage to the system, we'd want to make sure that we could go back to you and ask for you to cover the cost of the damage. And I think it's only fair and right. We don't want to limit our ability to recoup the cost. So if you look at Utah, you look at Virginia, they have a line in there, something to the effect that says the electric distribution company is not liable for the damage. So as you're working things up, we can provide you with language that we think makes sense. And again, it is in Utah and it is in Virginia. I understand it's in Virginia.
That'd be great.
Thank you for that. And I think the notice and reporting, I understand you were just talking about that. Why would we want or not want people to notify us? Originally we did, because we were concerned about just the safety issue to our employees. If they're working on the system, we want to know. But because the provision got in there about not being able to backfeed during an outage, and because there was a limit on how big these systems could be, we felt that it is really like an appliance on the customer side. We didn't see what we would do with that information. So like TJ, I don't know if we're opposed to it. It's just like not for our purposes do we really need it. I think the question back is, what's the goal of that? What would be the goal of creating, people registering with us. Maybe it's more important to the fire safety folks. You might want to ask them, do they want to know where these are? Because if there's an incident in the building, you know, we're not going into the home.
Right.
But fire responders they might want to know where this is.
If we're at a point 10, 20 years down the road where they're cheaper and more people are using them, would you want to know then?
You know, I did ask our team that, and outside of the safety issue, there was not a compelling reason. Again, it's a behind the meter,
Right.
it's a load reducer. You know, people are doing lots of things behind the meter. They're charging cars, they're putting an efficient apply. It's so complex. We're relying on our advanced metering systems and other kind of really smart innovation that's happening with like learning a lot more about load and usage and that if we had everybody kind of notifying about every appliance or every load reducer, I'm not sure what, you know, our folks were like, don't do it for that reason. They didn't feel like they needed it, but there might be other reasons. So depending on your goal for collecting that information, there might be really good reasons to do it. It's just not the ones that we are needing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have people installing batteries?
Yeah.
This seems like this could be an analogous situation where a battery could backfeed the grid. If some safety device failed somehow, right?
Yeah.
So how do you handle that in terms of liability, in terms of safety, and you know?
Yeah, again, I think it's more from what I was hearing. Again, I'm happy to go back and talk to the experts on this, that it was more of a local, you know, not like on the grid system, you know, more like in the home, right? More on that side of the meter in terms of the safety concerns.
Right.
I mean, it's a big battery.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, these plug-in PVs aren't going to generate very much.
Right. That was
There's not going to be very much generation. But with a battery,
a large, again,
2 Tesla batteries or whatever, it seems like the whole purpose of that is to backfeed. Is to be available for the house, and it's also connected to the grid. And then it also makes me think of vehicle to grid car batteries. We don't have much of that now, but that presumably coming.
The PC just adopted rules around battery storage, and there's thresholds, right? So I think with many of these things, when it's you know, not that big, not a big deal, less concern, but when you hit a threshold, it becomes a concern.
Okay, thanks.
So there are provisions in place so that if you have your Tesla, your batteries in your home, 210 kW, your neighbor can't use it. There are provisions somehow that your batteries don't go to.
Well, in this case, with these PVs, plug-in PVs, what we heard yesterday, with modeling, wherever that was, it did modeling about, suppose we had 40% market penetration of these things. Is there any chance that could damage a substation? And their conclusion was that any excess generation would be absorbed by other houses, other users.
The immediate generation. Right.
Yeah, within a substation territory.
Well, within the single, yes.
So I guess from that, I'm concluding that, yes, I guess if it goes back onto the grid, that it's going back onto the grid and it would be available for anybody who's using electrons off the grid. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to get out over my skis real fast on this, but our chief operating officer.
I'm already face planted. So.
Yeah. When I brought this in, the limits on the size of these systems and so early, you know, and like we will certainly come back if we felt like this was causing trouble. He did not feel like outside of like safety issues and the fact that they couldn't backfeed during and out, you know, kind of check boxes for us, the things we care about.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So the ULs stipulations, as far as I understand it, require an electrician and a special plug and all this other stuff, which would make it completely untenable. So I think Virginia, which I have not read yet, put in a provision so that you could plug in one unit. They have, they have a clearly defined the power output as a true like appliance, where you just buy it and plug it in with the proper backfeed
Yeah, with the cutoff. Yeah.
and all that stuff.
Right.
But do you have comment about that one way or the other?
I really don't, our folks, again, aren't in the home, right? They're not. And so the electricians, are really, well, we're not really electricians and installing systems. And I think, we're more concerned about what gets onto the system beyond the home. So that safety concern and those issues there, I think are more, you have other witnesses that could probably speak better.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, is
Hi,
Louis.
Good morning. How are you?
good. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you. And thanks for allowing me to join you by Zoom. I got a little behind with outages yesterday, so I'm trying to catch up. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for being here.
For the record, Louis Porter, General Manager of Washington Electric Co-op, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify on this provision. Like Vermont Electric Co-op, we're not opposed to the bill. A couple of points I'd like to make about it, and happy to answer any questions, of course, that I'm able to. We don't always talk about safety in your committee, but it is the most important thing that we do. It's more important than any of the other issues: reliability, outage management, personnel, costs, anything else that we do talk about in your committee. That it's more important than any of those, as important as each of those are. I very much support the idea that these devices be fully inspected and overseen by Underwriters Laboratory before being deployed. That wasn't the case in all versions of this bill, and we're glad to see that that's there. That gives me a lot of confidence that both the line workers and the people who have these in their homes will be protected. So I think that's a great and an important, and should be a thorough review by UL, just as it is for other appliances in the home. On reporting, I was the one, I think, in the Senate side who argued against having a reporting requirement, and there were really two reasons for that. One is, without any ability to enforce or require that reporting happen, it's not going to happen in many of the cases. And so we're going to get a skewed view of the data and maybe a false sense of security that we know where these things are when they're not. And if they are truly an appliance, then we don't require people to register hot tubs with us or microwaves or any other appliances. And so because of those two things, I would rather, if we're going to be separate from these things, then these are not going to be within the PUC domain. I would like to just keep that line clear. We spend a lot of time working with members and educating them and working with them to make sure that the line between our responsibility and theirs is clear and that it ends at the meter. And that's not always easy to do. But this, to me, having people register these, report these to their utility, blurs that line of where the member responsibility is and where the electric co-op's responsibility is. And you can see how important that is, because if we were responsible for everything being done electrically to code within somebody's home, there is a very large share of my members' houses, including probably mine, that we would not be able to connect to. And so it's important to maintain that line and have that line of demarcation be clear to everybody. So that's my thoughts on reporting.
Yeah, those are actually decent. Those are good thoughts. I had not thought, I was thinking only about, are we ever going to need to know where these are? But I had not thought about compliance. So you're right. I mean, some percentage of people, probably a big percentage of people aren't gonna, just like the warranty paperwork. So that's interesting. And then our earlier conversation about making it clear that you guys aren't responsible for these things, that could kind of blur that line. So those points make sense to me.
Thank you. And that's my third and final point I wanted to talk with you about is I think it's really essential that it be clear that this is outside of the PUC process, and I think that's fine given the size and scope of these, and given the fact that there's not going to be compensation for excess generation. But there's one other aspect that I think would be helpful to make clear, and that is the consumer complaints aspect. So I can't share my wording with you, but I have and I can't share it because I don't have permission to share on screen, but I have one sentence that I would like to amend in subsection B of 1.3, which is just to add that it's not otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the PUC. And I can send that to you, Madam Chair, for your consideration.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But oh wait, I've got sharing now. Thank you. So this would be my hopefully simple amendment. Would be this one phrase additional in subsection B.
Can you make that much, Lewis, please?
Sorry.
We can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it?
Well, we can see it.
Well,
We can see
some
it.
of
We
us
can't-
probably can.
Yeah.
Well, I will share it with you. It's one phrase, so I will share it with you by email. But the reason I think this is so important is to
Where does this go again? Where?
it would go in subsection B, which begins the installation of a portable solar energy generation device.
Page two,
Page 2,
line 3. that
line
section.
3. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I would simply add to the end of that section, to subsection B, or otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the Public Utility Commission.
Okay.
And
At the end of the sentence.
at the end of the sentence, yep. And then I think there's a or that would have to be eliminated since I'm adding to the list there. But I'll send it to you by email.
Okay.
The reason I think this is important is to Andrea's point, which is that we get wrapped up in things related to people's home energy use that are really not our responsibility or that we're particularly well suited to solve. And sometimes that can be solved just with a conversation with the member, which we're happy to do. But sometimes that goes into a PUC complaint by the member, which can be very costly for us to answer. We recently had a PUC complaint by one of our members who had a net metering system that was undersized. And that member believed and argued that it was a metering issue on our end, which, as it required us to prove a negative, became quite complicated. We ended up spending about $20,000 in legal fees and experts to answer that complaint. We were shown in the end not to be in the wrong, and so it was resolved. But that is an expense that the rest of our membership had to bear. And if these things are going to be outside of the CPG, Certificate of Public Good PUC process, I think they should be fully out. That would still leave open to the consumer who buys these consumer protection through the court process, through the AG's consumer protection office. And of course, any other issue they have with us, including wanting us to check meters or wanting us to respond to other complaints, would still be open to them through the PUC. But I would suggest that we do not want to open up the possibility of expensive PUC complaints based on these when there isn't a CPG or other engagement through the PUC process. So,
Right.
I don't know if that was as clear as mud or not, but
No, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah.
happy to answer any questions.
I think Rep. Howland has one.
So I think you raised a point on what I would call or referred to as power quality issues. So with the advent of all the electronics in a home today, computer systems and what have you. If when somebody had an issue with power quality, the electrician was supposed to balance the load between the two legs of the panel. And if somebody has a very nominal load in their system and they plug this 1,200 watts into the one leg, the effects it has on the other leg within the home for power quality may be an issue, particularly if the other leg has a single phase water pump or something with a large starting current or other effects.
Are you concerned about, and let me just say at the forefront here, I'm definitely not an electrical engineer or an electrician. But are you concerned about breaker masking, or are you concerned about damage to other devices?
No, that the other electronic device is going to get affected. The computer on leg B is going to be affected because of what's happening on leg A, because the additional power source is solely on leg A. And these are the types of issues I experienced with people who had 120 volt jet type water pumps. So large starting current, and without, like you say, the complaint only comes back to the source of the electricity without separate generation.
Yeah. So I think this is exactly a case of why we should rely on UL to inspect these things and certify them, because that will be something they will take into account and consider when they're approving these for sale, as well as the prevention of backfeeding when the grid itself is down.
In the initial net generating era, the inverters were all UL rated, and then for a period of time, UL removed their underwriting of the inverters, and so the utility didn't know which inverters were pre-UL remover and which were post-UL remover. But backfeed in the initial development, backfeed was an issue for the utility I worked for.
Yeah, and we've had issues more recently with some what are called hybrid inverters also, where they might be connected into both a solar system and a home battery system. We've had questions and done some digging on the inverter in those for exactly the reasons that you point out. I think given the size of these and given that the relative simplicity of them, I'm confident that if UL does list them, does register them, they will work as they're supposed to. But I hear what you're saying, and we have had some questions about that very fact, both from a compensation net metering question. We definitely do not want to be compensating people for power that originated either on the grid or from a fossil generator. And also, of course, from a safety standpoint of line crews or others who might be coming into contact with wires during an outage. I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but
I'm outside with that. Well,
happy to talk with you offline too, if helpful.
Great.
And I think that the state fire inspector, electrical inspector's office came in on the Senate side, and they may be able to shed some light here as well.
They're coming in next week, I think.
Great.
Super. All right. Thanks, Louis. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Would you like me to email just to you, to the full committee, or to somebody else the language?
Send it to the full committee and copy our committee assistant. That'd be great.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. Thanks for zooming in. All right. Hi, Ken.
Good morning. Madam Chair, thanks for the opportunity to speak. For the record, Ken Nolan, I'm the General Manager of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. I think my testimony is going to be pretty short because we are generally in agreement with what Andrea and Lewis just described. We had pretty extensive testimony on the Senate side, and the Committee on Natural Resources there addressed most of our concerns. The two left really around worker safety that Andrea had talked to initially. The UL 3700 listing helps quite a bit there. I think the linemen we're hearing from are still nervous about this, and I noted that you have IBEW coming in tomorrow, so I'll defer to their business manager as far as their thoughts, but would encourage you to listen carefully there because there is concern amongst the working force that without a physical disconnect, they're not completely comfortable relying on the UL device to disconnect it when there's an outage. So you may hear more comments there. The other is on the liability, and I would echo that both the Utah bill and the Virginia bill in process have included specific liability language saying the utilities are not responsible, and we're happy to provide that language out of those bills if it's helpful. But we would also like to see that for exactly the reason that Andrea described. We want to be sure that if there is damage done to the system, the utilities aren't having to cover that cost and spread it to other customers. Also, we agree with Lewis's language. The customer complaints that come anytime electric bill comes out a way a customer doesn't expect can not only be expensive in legal fees, but they take an enormous amount of staff time and administrative time just to document what's going on. So being clear that this is truly an appliance and not subject to discussions with CAPI or other state agencies if the customer is not liking what they're seeing would be helpful. And on the registration side, I think as long as we're treating this as an appliance and we're not counting on it for, as was described earlier, electric vehicles or batteries where the utility is including them in utility programs for peak reduction, and there really isn't a strong interaction with the grid. In this case, it's just intended to be reducing the customer's load, and that's something the utility doesn't need to be involved with. And I think it would actually create confusion and administrative burden if we're now trying to track these, especially as stated in the title of the bill, they're portable, right? You'd have to not only track where they're installed initially, but where they move to over time, which can be pretty complicated to keep track of. So with that, I'll stop. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, Rick Campbell.
So if a customer buys a battery and installs it, not using any incentive money, that still has to be registered with the PUC, right? There's still a TPG involved.
There's under the rule 9.000 that just got put out. There would be a registration requirement, potentially a CPG requirement, and those would have to be tracked.
Yeah. Okay. But that involves potentially a lot more juice than a portable solar.
Correct. And in the batteries, even they're on the customer side, but they have the potential to, in some cases, double the home load when they're charging, or put power back onto the grid. So there's actually an argument there that the utilities need to look at transformer sizing, the connection to the house. There are interconnection issues that the way this bill is structured would not apply to the portable solar project.
Oh, so there could be infrastructure that the utility has to adjust somehow to accommodate a behind the meter battery, even if there's no incentive and no ratepayer money involved in incentives, right?
Correct. I mean, if the ratepayer chooses to not participate in the peak reduction program and they're just going to put a battery in for themselves, they still affecting the load at the home enough that it could have repercussions at the distribution transformer level or the service line level that we want to make sure are taken care of. I think that's the purpose of the PUC rule that they just put out.
Okay, great. All right, thanks.
Any more questions for Ken? All right. Ken, thanks for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we can go. We are on the floor at 1 o'clock. We're actually done with testimony for the day. We can go. We'll be on the floor at 1, and we are back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with more testimony on 202.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.